Joining us now is my friend Joe Conor, co-author of a great new book, The New Founders, which is doing very well. And he, of course, lost his dad when he was, I think, 9 years old to the FALN terrorists at Franz's Tavern, the bombing here in New York City. Joe, great to talk to you, sir.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me on. And you're right, it goes fast. I have a son who's finishing his sophomore year in high school and a daughter who's going into high school this year. And it goes very fast.
It does.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and you have written about this. You were on Fox and Friends the other morning talking about this, although they didn't give you a long enough time. And this is so troubling. Not only, as we have known for so long, are the professors at universities all over the country radical leftists in many cases, way to the left in many cases, and just good old-fashioned, you know, at least slightly left in probably most cases. But we're talking about former domestic terrorists who are given jobs by universities like NYU, Columbia University, and then student centers that are named after fugitive terrorists that are on the run.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, look, Steve, it's so outrageous. You can't. I'm almost laughing in some deranged way about this thing because it is insane. You have Kathy Bodine, who was a domestic terrorist, was put in prison for over 20 years for killing 3 people. Officer Waverly Brown, Edward O'Grady, and security guard Peter Page. And now she's a professor at an Ivy League school. And you know what? Columbia doesn't even disclose this. And, you know, I was saying the other day on Fox, it was, you know, you go and you buy a product for a couple of bucks and you see the ingredients on the side of it. Now you're paying $60,000 to send your kid to an Ivy League school, and you're not getting the ingredients as to what you're getting for the $60,000. You're getting terrorists, and it's really unbelievable. I'm sorry for laughing about it, and I shouldn't be laughing.
No, you're not laughing. You're laughing with disgust, like we all should be.
Yeah, and you know, it's. When you look at Bodine, she was part of the Weather Underground. She was part of a heist that killed people. But not only is Bodine at Columbia, there's murderers, aside just not terrorist murderers, just regular murderers. And like I said but Bodine's the crown jewel of what they have because she's a left-wing terrorist, and that's what they like. They like the punk Bill Ayers type, or Bernadine Dorn, and Kathy Bodine fits in that. So, you know, this is a crown jewel for Columbia to have someone like that on their staff.
Well, okay, but that's what I was going to ask you. What do they get out of this, especially if they're not advertising it front and center? What do they get out of it?
Well, I think they get the thrill of having a terrorist on their team and someone who knows Bill Ayers and someone who may know the president. But what they really get, I think, the other side is that they agree with their politics, and they'll bring them in here. They have at Columbia, they have something called the Criminal Justice Initiative, and they use this crazy phraseology. If you look at it, they'll say they're helping people who have been involved in mass incarceration. Now, to me, Steve, and probably to you, mass incarceration conjures up images of gulags, of concentration camps, of internment camps.
Right.
And those are groups of people being put away, innocent people being put away. The mass incarceration they're talking about is individuals being arrested and put in prison for violent crime.
I know, and that's awful because they rather have these people roam free, I guess.
Well, I would suppose, but the term mass incarceration, it conjures up some sort of sympathy for these people without really taking any effect of onto the victims. And, you know, we see this with the left all the time. You know, they come up with a phrase like this. Is it like the balanced approach means, you know, that Obama uses, means you tax people and you give it to others, or investment means spending, or fairness means, well, whatever Washington wants it to mean. You know, choice means taking the choice from an unborn child. But they manipulate the language, and you'll probably hear in the future mass incarceration. It's a terrible thing. But it's really just individuals being put away.
Absolutely. We're talking to Joe Conor, co-author of The New Founders. Father was killed by FALN terrorists here on the Steve Malzberg show. I have one study, one report that says there were 12 former members of domestic terrorist groups indoctrinating college students and professors around the country. Talk about the student centers at CCNY.
Yeah, at CCNY, and it came up about 5 or 6 years ago that we knew that this was going on. It's the William Morales or Guillermo Morales Asanta Shakur Student Center at CCNY. Now, Guillermo Morales was the chief bomb maker for the FALN. He likely built the bomb that killed my father. In 1978, on July 12th, which is my dad's birthday, he blew himself up in a safe house in Queens. He was arrested. Well, he was building a bomb at the time, of course. He was arrested, completely disfigured. He lost most of the fingers on his hand.
Right.
He lost his eye. He was allowed to he was sentenced. He was arrested, convicted, sentenced to 89 years in prison. Was allowed to go to a hospital to get a prosthetic device, where he unbelievably escaped.
Yep.
Right. So how does a guy with no hands escape? Anyway, let's not get into that. He ends up in Mexico, where he is arrested after killing a few cops with his guys, and instead of extraditing him to the U.S., where Reagan wanted to, that was in the mid-'80s, they sent him to Cuba, and he's been a guest of Castro ever since.
And he's not alone with the name on that student center.
Asanta Shakur.
Joanne
Chesimard, the Black Panther who killed Warner Forster on the New Jersey Turnpike, I think it was 71. She's also there. Now, they have a student center named after these two killers. And ironically, Steve, my dad went to CCNY for a while. You don't see any Frank Conor Student Center, do you?
It is beyond comprehension. It is beyond sick. It is beyond belief that this is where we are as a nation today. You know, Robert Redford came out not too long ago. He made the movie about the Weather Underground, and he said to George Stephanopoulos, and this was right before the marathon bombing in Boston, and he came out and he said that he empathized with the Weather Underground at the time, and Stephanopoulos said, but you knew about the violence? He said, oh yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, well,
these people are nuts.
He has a picture. If you look at his movie Illegal Eagles from the early 80s, there's a court scene, and in the background is the wanted poster for Guillermo Morales up on the wall there. So he was giving a little shout out to Morales at the time. Steve, they are sick, they are deranged, and you'll hear them now. They're saying that you need to have empathy for the children of these people who are put in prison for these crimes. And I got empathy for people who grew up without a father. I did. And I think we need to start thinking about the reasons why they're in jail.
Right.
Because they are criminals, because they murder people, and the people who really should be helped would be the victims of these crimes. And
Joe, you could take this further. And I talk about this all the time. The chief of police of Chicago, CBS was doing a report. They were following cops around through the streets of Chicago a few months ago during the height of the killings. And who gets killed? Kids. And they tracked down this guy. They captured him, and the sheriff or the cop said, this guy just got out of prison a year and a half ago on guns and shooting. And so they asked the police chief, how'd this guy get out?
Yeah.
And the police chief said, we have no room in prison. Now, so first of all, you want more laws when you can't even keep people in prison, and secondly, so how about? And nobody ever said this because it's like it's sacrilegious to the left. Build more prisons. No, are you crazy? We already have more prisons and people than. But if you got more criminals, you got to build more prisons, or we're doomed.
That's it. I mean, you hear these stats. They're saying, the horrible about this country is that whatever it is, 5% or 10% of certain people are in prison. But that's why, because they committed crimes. That's why they're in prison. They're not being in prison arbitrarily, or they're not being in prison for any other reason. If they weren't committing crimes, they wouldn't be in jail.
All right, Joe. So where do we go from here? I mean, how do we combat this? What could we do?
Well, Steve, I think what we have to do is exactly what you're doing, is get the word out. I say that people have the right to hire whoever they want, generally speaking. Now, the government has other rules about that. They restrict hirings and that with their quotas. But I think the only way to stop this is to make sure people understand what's going on and get the word out. And that's what we tried to do on Fox the other day. That's clearly what we're doing now with you. Let people know what's going on at CCNY and at Columbia. And the best way to combat it is by demanding that they fire these people, and let the buyer beware. Let us know what's going on. Let the buyer understand what they're buying and pay.
And
use
if
their
you
mouth
can,
and their feet.
and if you're an alumni of these universities, check out and see if they, especially, well, you know now if you got Columbia, you got CCNY, you got NYU, but if you contribute to the alumni association or you give contributions to the university, make sure there's no former domestic or other terrorists on the payroll. And if there is, register your voice, register a complaint, say I'm not going to contribute.
Right. Exactly.
That because money talks.
That's the way to do it, and get the word out, let people understand what they're doing. There has to be consequences to hiring these people. If we sit silently and let it happen, then the tyranny continues. And we have to, as a society, speak up, do what I'm doing, do what you're doing, and use your mouth and use your pocketbooks and make them pay.
All right, my friend. How's the great book doing, The New Founders?
Oh, thanks for asking. Mike Duncan and I actually have a book signing tonight in New Jersey. It's done really well.
Oh, tell us where, quickly. Tell us where.
It's going to be down in Somerville at a Knights of Columbus.
Oh, okay. What time?
I think it's at 8.
Okay, 8 o'clock tonight if you're in the area, New Jersey, Somerville.